Welcome to the People's Guild.
Each week we explore the Splinterland universe with guests from all across the mythical land of Praetoria.
Join us on our journey as we discuss the evolution of the game, the strategy, the lore, and the exciting path that lies ahead.
To support the People's Guild, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and also check us out on PeakD, YouTube, and Twitter.
Send your questions, suggestions, and epic battles in our comments through Twitter or email at thepeoplesguildspl@gmail.com. We'll feature the best in our episodes and maybe airdrop you some prizes.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the People's Guild. Another week, another episode. A little bit of a curveball for you guys. Our good buddy and co-host Hepthorn is out dealing with some stuff for today. So I have asked the one and only Tails from the Cryptmancer to fill in as guest host for the day. So thank you for that, Tails. Quick shout out to Aqualis. They've continued to kind of sponsor the People's Guild in the background. Got some very cool things going on over there with the new Splinterlands marketplace. Go check it out. There's some contests going on to kind of encourage us to adopt that marketplace and get them to be a kind of a more permanent fixture in the Splinterlands economy. We have a very special guest here for you guys. It's another new team member that we have yet to speak with here at the People's Guild. Super excited to get him on. One of my favorite names. It kind of brings up I'll never forget the first thing I thought when I saw your gamer handle was a joke that my nephew told me many moons ago, which I will prompt the joke here in a minute once I introduce you. But we've got Investigator Harry. Welcome to the show, Gator. It's good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I want to get things started. Investigator, what is that? And do you know what you call an alligator wearing a vest?
Yeah, that is my crypto handle. That I was trying to come up with something that was different from my other gamer handles that I could use to keep my crypto stuff separate from my personal accounts and stuff, which did not work out that well. Since I ended up working for a crypto company. But basically I was trying to just come up with a wordplay on kind of investigating and something animal, which is at the time my wife was working on a series of kids books, and all of the characters are things like deer engineer, mechanic monkey. So I was kind of inspired by that to make Investigator.
So have you heard that joke often, I guess, since you adopted the handle?
A couple times, not too long.
Yeah, cool. All right, man. Well, I'd love to kind of get to know you. You're kind of a man, a few words on the town halls. You get straight to the point and drop, what are the details coming this week in the new updates that are coming to production. Sometimes you get a little bit more loose-lipped and speak, a little smidge of what's coming next week, but not much beyond that. So would love to kind of get to know you. We were talking a little bit off air before we hit record, and you mentioned previous jobs and doing some gaming with some ex-colleagues from there. I'd love to kind of hear, was that all software development, QA stuff that you were doing before? And kind of how did you end up working for Steemmonsters and Aggie and Matt?
Sure. So I've had a couple jobs before this. The previous one was actually working for oil and gas software. So I was doing mainly support side or fixing issues with some oil field monitoring software. And a bunch of my coworkers are board game enthusiasts. So we started playing games during lunch breaks, and eventually that spilled off into us meeting outside of work and having game nights. And before that, I worked on medical software, which was back on the East Coast, good more than a decade ago now. So as far as working for Splinterlands, I was a player first. So in like the late 2020s, I started playing Splinterlands, actually for a blog that I'm still writing today. I have some PT posts and stuff that I'm up to like 140, 140-ish articles. But just as content, hey, there's this crypto related game. I'm gonna pay the $10 for a spell book and see how long it takes me to make my $10 investment back. And got welcomed by the community at the time. Steam Dan, Clove, sent me some packs. Joined the Discord, and I guess I should go back and say, so prior to this, I was also a big Magic the Gathering player for a few years. Semi-pro, so I qualified for some pro tours. I attended some pro tours. I never made money on any of the pro tours, but I played it fairly seriously for a period of time. So this was kind of it's a trading card game. This is kind of my wheelhouse for experience. So I played for maybe a year. I'm trying to remember when the game blew up, but when the game blew up, they were like tons of people joined the Discord. They basically had Biz as their one support person who's working part-time. So I like to be helpful. I would try to answer questions on Discord for all the new players that were coming in when stuff exploded. And at a certain point, they're like, "Hey, we'd like to pay you guys that are answering questions for us to actually be support for us." So I got pulled in as part-time support since I had a full-time job that I was doing. And a bunch of us came in and started getting, it's like, got $20 an hour doing official support for Splinterlands at the time. So did that for, I don't know, several months. So I'm a software developer. They were hiring software developers at the time. At one point, there was a internal call with Hardpoint, and it was like hey, we're gonna hang out and like play Splinterlands and talk, and like anybody that wants to. And I was the only other person that showed up at the time. Like, hey, while you're here, I have a degree in computer programming. I'm working as a full-time developer at another job. I published a game on my own on Steam, which I guess is something else I should mention. I self-published a game also over a decade ago. But I've got game development experience. Do you mind if I apply for a job here doing development? And he's like, yeah, sure. We're just trying to throw people left and right. We can give you some work to do, see if it works out. So I had a second interview with the VP of Engineering, who was K-Bucks at the time, who has been here for quite a while. And that went well, since they gave me a trial and set me up with a code base. And I started fixing bugs with Splinterlands and kind of split up from there. At this point, I've worked here for over 2 years. So I'm one of the main people that does kind of the releases now. One of the handful of people that actually have pretty much full access, since I'm on the operations team. I need access to actually get on the servers and administer stuff with them in the database. So kind of the history in a nutshell.
Awesome, man. It feels like the very natural progression from medical software to oil and gas to Web3. I'm curious. You brought up Magic the Gathering, and that seems to be, I I'm not going to say a common thread between most of us, but there is a good chunk of folks who have a Magic the Gathering background. Have you, and since you were on the semi-pro tour, I'm one of my guildmates by extension, that entails you as well. Deuce Crypto, shout out to him. He was, I want to say, a pro Magic the Gathering player, and we've all heard stories of Yaba's collection and his affinity for Magic the Gathering. Rogue is another great Magic player. Have there been any relationships or names that you run into since you have taken on the mantle at Splinterlands that you have recognized or have subsequently discovered that, hey, I played you in a tournament, or I knew you from Magic the Gathering days? Has there been any of that?
Sadly, no. I haven't run into anybody that I know from Magic days so far, anyways. If there are people, then I may not know of them because they're using some other handle.
Aggie hasn't doxed them yet.
Yeah, but no other internal staff. Everybody working for the company I have met working here, not outside the company.
Cool. Have you seen? I just saw. There was a lot of hype around Magic the Gathering recently with their partnership with Lord of the Rings. The One Ring card I think was recently discovered. One of one. And have you seen? Has it made it across your radar who picked that card up?
Yeah, like on the name now. Post Malone.
Post Malone.
Yeah, was it 2.5 million he bought it for, something like that?
I think he bought it for $2 million. I just saw him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he took a little deep dive trying to pitch Joe Rogan on Magic the Gathering, and yeah, it really struck me by surprise that it was Post Malone who ended up securing that. But yeah, very cool, man. I used to play Magic as well. I was never anything more than amateur, just playing with a group of buddies back in Texas growing up. But yeah, my love for trading cards is definitely what was the initial draw for me to Splinterlands and the online Web3 based trading card game genre. Do you still dabble with traditional tabletop trading card games?
Not really. Since moving to Texas, which is where I am now, I kind of stopped playing. Back when I lived in the East Coast a little bit, I actually got into Magic because of my father, who still collects more than plays. I have a tendency to take things seriously. So that's kind of when I got into Magic. I went to tournaments and started going to the official stuff, but he just likes to open packs and make stupid decks and plays with my sister's boyfriend and other cousins and stuff. So no, I've kind of fallen out of any real collectible card gaming last 10 years or so. Still get some board games in, but yeah, which most of my money that I spend on collecting stuff goes towards Splinterlands at this point. So.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there, Gator. Preaching to the choir, man. I'm curious and I just want to touch on one more thing with the your kind of introduction to the game and finding Steemmonsters Splinterlands. You mentioned the game that you published. Is that still around and kicking on Steam?
Yeah, technically is. I don't know how well it'll run, but I put out a guild management simulator, since one of the other things from my past was playing EverQuest and to some degree World of Warcraft fairly seriously for a couple of years. So when I actually made a game, one of my friends came up with the idea, and we kind of tossed it around, and then actually put in the work to make it. So it's still up on Steam. Doesn't see a lot of sale, but
do you mind plugging the name? I'd love to check it out.
It's called It's a Wipe.
It's a wipe.
Yep. So
All right, let's see here. I
the
got you.
you are managing a guild, so you do not directly control your characters, except for the one that is you. So it's you and 9 other NPCs basically, and you can kind of give them directions. It's mostly a puzzle kind of strategy game. So you need to figure out different mechanics and what the appropriate things, commands you need to give your people to not die horribly, combined with a little bit of grinding up loot and morale management. So you need to keep your guild happy. So people that are unhappy tend to behave badly and don't necessarily listen to you if they're not happy.
Well, so are you suggesting that salt exists in the NPC world as well, Harry? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I ran a guild for a couple of years, and dealing with people and personality conflicts is definitely kind of the basis for that game.
Oh man, yeah, I'm looking through the screenshots and yeah, this looks fun, man. So some of the comments that you can make. OMG heal. Stop DPS. That's great, man. So I'm curious with, obviously the team is hyper focused on land at the moment. Kind of thinking bigger picture, Hardpoint came on the show and talked about his kind of grander vision for land throughout the coming releases and beyond. Is there some sort of inkling from you to kind of bring in bits and pieces from something like It's a Wipe into Praetoria, and do you have the platform to kind of make these sorts of suggestions and kind of champion these ideas for the future of land?
Well, something that I would like to do is, if we ever get in a spot where they're looking for ideas, I've got a couple other game projects that I started that are half unformed on my computer from years past, that really, when I got into them, it's like, yeah, I need multiple devs and art staff to finish this in the next 10 years. Yeah, I would love to pitch some stuff, but right now I don't feel like that's going to happen with how much is on the plate. And we've got a lot of stuff to get out. There's land in the next several phases. Not to aside from 1.5, there's also the actual 2.0 phase and 3.0 phase, or we rename them. So I think 1.0 is now the endpoint. They're all fractional, but Soulkeep, they've got all of the new player experience stuff that we've been kicking down the road for a while now, other than short, quick fixes for stuff. Weirdbeard has all kinds of ideas for things he wants to do with the game, which I think may be taking a little bit more center stage since he's taken over as kind of the product owner for Splinterlands. We do have the whole Arcade Colony and Invenium projects, which are kind of off over with the separate GLG team more than with the people working on Splinterlands. But since it's all under the same company, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that they've got a backlog of before they start looking for ideas. I was hoping with Arcade Colony they would give us some opportunities to make little games, but so far that's still hasn't really gotten off the ground as far as I know. But yeah, game design is something I like to do, but right now it's very much nose to the grindstone, fixing stuff with Borderlands.
So curious, Gator, with all of those projects that are in the hopper and in queue here, where's tech modernization kind of fit into that? Is that just kind of happening in step with all of those deliverables? Is it kind of just part of the program, or how does that prioritize right now?
Yeah, it's a kind of as we can fit it in. Right now, land 1.5 has pretty much sucked all the oxygen out of almost anything else getting done. Once that's out the door, I think we'll start seeing more of a focus on moving more pages towards tech modernization. I do also think we will. I'm hoping that we will see some more push for it to be adapted to a more mobile-friendly design too. I know that's another thing that's been on the back burner for a while. Um, we have been trying to kick out some mobile updates for the actual mobile apps. Kind of myself and Melon Man, one of the other devs, have thrown a couple fixes in where we can. But yeah, definitely, it's a far cry from the mobile app experience to all the functionality that's on the web page. So
Yeah, and it's interesting, and the reason why I asked it was exactly, I guess, for that reason was the mobile experience, and the reason why it's kind of been interesting for me is lately there's been some other Web3 games that I've been following, just trying to investigate, I guess, pun intended. Champions Arena from Gala Games, Stella Fantasy from Ring Games. These are fully available. Well, at least Champions Arena is on both Google and Apple stores, and Stella Fantasy has their full mobile client for Android released. And it's interesting because you can play those games while on the road. And I would love to be able to do battles and brawls and tournaments on the road with Splinterlands on my phone. And it seems like it would be a great avenue to bring in new players potentially, which just by the very nature of getting it published and updated, where it's more, I would say, functionality complete would be great. I know it's been something that's not necessarily been prioritized, and I know it's, as you mentioned, not really on the radar right now, but it seems like a lot of the other Web3 players are kind of going with almost a mobile first kind of hybrid Web 2.5 push to attract a player base. So I'm just wondering if that's in the cards for Splinterlands anytime in the next year or two.
I hope so. There's definitely been some discussions about what's going on with mobile. Right now, I feel like it's not a great experience for people to come into a buggy mobile app that's going to drive away more players than it's going to promote the game. Granted, you can usually battle somewhat decently on the mobile app as it exists, at least as far as ranked goes. But I do think that's going to probably come to a head in the next few months, that we'll need to actually finally make a decision about either putting more time on the mobile app or making the website more mobile friendly so that we can move away from the apps. As talked about, I think, on the last town hall, they are starting to look at Rebellion. And from what I have heard about it so far, I think it's going to require substantial work on the mobile apps to keep them working with some of the new mechanics that they're looking at. So I don't know if they're going to want us to put in the effort to update the existing one, if we're going to actually start to, do a full project to revamp a new mobile app, or actually get to making the website mobile friendly. That is above my pay grade, but something that I have been asking them to decide on so we can move forward with it. But
Yeah, I'm curious because from a design and development standpoint, mobile enabled kind of web is going to be completely different than a custom kind of mobile client, but which is a separate code base and separate maintenance, kind of track. And when you mention potentially new mechanics, coming with Rebellion, I mean, I'm sure there'll be obviously new abilities, card abilities and stuff. We saw already what Zerial can do in the game, and maybe there's more of that mixed in some form or fashion. But I'm curious also when Weirdbeard's talked about Battles 2.0, that's also on the, I think, roadmap from Splinterfest, about a year ago. So that's coming as well, which would seemingly change a lot of the battle, mechanics as well, and the experience on the web side. So I guess the strategy and the vision for mobile should, I guess we'll find out sooner than later, right?
I hope so. As far as from my end, I've been pushing for us to fix up mobile for the last couple of years, but it has not been a serious priority. But I'm hoping that they will spare some dev time towards it in a more official fashion after we get Land 1.5 out. But we'll see. That is going to be more up to Weirdbeard and his team. My actual work is more on the ops side, though. That's kind of a whole other topic to get into. But for the mobile side, I'm hoping that. I know we've been saying that tech modernization is kind of the baseline for getting a mobile-friendly website, and that, to some respects, is true. We need the developers to finish moving everything over, or the UI developers, so they can start to focus on actually making a mobile-friendly experience on those screens. So we're not trying to do it across two different UI platforms.
Yeah, Gator, you just rattled off a whole slew of things that I think us as the community we've been in step with the team in terms of hyper focusing on land and not really thinking beyond that. There's obviously been some whispers and talks around what's potentially to come in the last quarter of the year, and land. You mentioned it. The community can feel it. You can feel it on the town halls. Has superseded everything else. It's priority numero uno. I'm curious. We see the and hear some of the frustration voiced, and I know that it's probably a bit of a product of I think it's fair to say there's a decent amount of salt floating around 1.5, and how much pressure? How is the team morale? How are you guys feeling? I would love to just kind of get a pulse of how is Gator doing? How is the team doing? Is everybody feeling okay? Do we feel like is Splinterlands going to be okay with 1.5?
Yeah, it's just taking longer than pretty much everyone would like. Aggie definitely wanted land out in August and is particularly not happy that it didn't happen. But there may be some. It's kind of telephone. So one person talks to the dev, then they talk to a C-suite person, and that person talks to Aggie. And the message he gets about where land is not necessarily what the dev was saying to his actual boss or to Weirdbeard at the time. So I am not officially on land. My team is the one team basically that's not been pulled into land fully. I guess I should go back and talk a little bit about what my actual job is at Splinterlands, maybe, and then go back into this question.
Yeah, bring it on.
So when I started, I was since I had a lot of development experience, I got made initially a developer. When they decided they're going to hire me full time, it was around the time when they were trying to figure out an organization. So they made me basically a team lead for what was the sustaining team, kind of the team focused on fixing stuff that already existed rather than developing new products. Then when we had the layoffs at the end of last year and basically reorganization, they restructured all the teams. And they kind of wrapped what was the sustaining team. Basically, everything Splinterlands got moved into the enhancements team. And they needed someone to basically be the product owner for the operations team. No one wanted to do it. They asked a couple other people before me. They said no. So I agreed to do it, but I do not have an infrastructure background. I'm not like a systems architect guy. They hired me to work on fixing stuff for Splinterlands. That's kind of my knowledge base, doing coding. I have familiarity with like organizational running, Jira and meetings and stuff. So the other couple people on the team are people that have more heavy infrastructure experience and do a lot of the systems design, and we work pretty closely with the database people. But I usually just go off and steal stuff from Weirdbeard or just fix stuff with the game. So I have not been officially pulled into land. I did spend a couple weeks fixing bugs with land when it became really apparent that we were very far behind from where we need to be, and that there was still a lot of stuff outstanding or stuff not working properly. They thought it would. Aggie and Weirdbeard, I believe, thought it was far closer to done than it actually was, which is why they said it was going to be up in Mavs. Went and took a look. It's like, it's not ready yet. It needs a significant amount of development time still on it. And they're not trying to rush it because, we've got one shot to launch land 1.5, and we want it to be a good experience for people. We definitely don't want it to be buggy, since it's, a lot of financial investments from people riding on this. All that being said, so hopefully we get land 1.5 done soon. We've got a big meeting tomorrow internally to kind of go over what's left and try to work out who's going to do it. Praetoria is going to be back from his vacation, and that's it. He expected land to be done before he went on vacation. He wasn't planning to take a vacation while they were still doing land. I think part of the problem is also, they talked about this, putting more devs on a project doesn't necessarily make it faster. They got to a point where they realized how much work they had left to do and put more devs on the project, which, surprise, added a bunch of time to bring those devs up to speed on the project and didn't necessarily get things done faster. So just because they pulled, Cryptomancer and Hardpoint, at some points, pretty much everybody on the enhancement team on to working on this didn't magically make it suddenly get done.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment as well. I think, I know the team has dealt with some salt from the community and Mav chat and what have you because of the timing. But, to your point, Gator, this is, you get one shot to launch land, which is, land 1.5 is really effectively the launch of land for all intents and purposes for the game itself, the game mode. And, there's a lot of data underlying, a lot of meta. You live, that's it. You unleash that into the productive environment, you can't undo that. So if there's any calculation issues or bugs or stuff printing when it shouldn't be printing, that's a big problem. And in my I guess take on this would be, take your time, get it right. I know people are not going to be happy about the delays, but it's much better than having letting a bad genie out of the bottle and you can't get it fixed, right? So I would say, the content creators and the community leaders should provide air cover for you as as the company to say, hey, we only get one shot at this. Let's make sure it's a good first impression, that there's no issues with data, with anything with assets that negatively impacts the game. Because I will say, like, what Splinterlands does really well, and kudos to you and your team and other members of the Splinterlands team, you guys put out code that is solid. Like, there's not a lot of redos. You obviously do the testing. From a average player perspective, we don't see issues per se. We just play the game and we get new functionality and new releases, and everything's usually great, which is a testament to the work that you do. So yeah, when it comes to something as complex and as big as land, it's probably, I'm guessing, the biggest code release Splinterlands will have done in one drop. So yeah, I mean, let's make sure we take the time here.
Yeah, it is a ridiculous number of changed files right now. Having looked at the land changes, and yeah, we do want to make sure that it comes out as a clean product. Especially from my end, I tend to, coming from a support side of Splinterlands originally, I want things to work well. Bug fixing is kind of often my main focus, so I prefer if we put things out that don't have bugs rather than us go back and try to clean it up later.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Tails. I completely agree with you. I think the vast majority of sentiment that I've heard shared in the content creator space, floating around on Twitter, from kind of the bigger names, you see it in Discord a little bit, is support with conviction for what the team is doing. For all intents and purposes, we've been waiting for 2.5 years for land. What is a few more weeks to really stick the landing? So while I understand the impatience, while I understand the frustration, what's a little bit more patience? So yeah, I appreciate what you guys are doing, man. And yeah, the support is there. You guys, stay positive. Don't work yourselves, to the bone and burn the candle at both ends. Is back to that laundry list of items that you kind of went through on your checklist for the rest of the year. You guys aren't really going to be able to take your foot off the pedal post 1.5 anyways, right? We don't want you guys burning out.
Yeah, I think Hardpoint and Fibertrad kind of burnt themselves out a little bit last month, because they were really killing themselves to try to get it out. I think they're going back to a more sane work schedule, because they were working like 6-7 day weeks and working 12-hour days and stuff, which you can't do that long term. Be healthy. So I think for this month we're gonna try to do a sane, like, okay, we'll get it out when it's done. Let's just focus and get through it. There is a lot of internal pressure to get it done and get it out, because we definitely want it out before we launch Rebellion and any future card sets that come out, because we want to have a place for the old cards to go land. And then, there's so much that we want to do. It's just a matter of finding the time to get to it. So,
all right. Well, Tails, did you have any more kind of thoughts, questions on land? Go ahead.
Not specifically on land, but maybe we could switch gears and talk about another, current trending topic in the community. And we've been talking about DAO proposals recently, and what's been going, passed and what's to be implemented. And one of those that I think passed and that has, is on the schedule to get updated is the battle helpers and the bots proposals that Dave McCoy put forth. And one of those involved, battle helpers in terms of service. Curious from your perspective, Gator, coming from an operations viewpoint on that, is that something that, Splinterlands is able to enforce, detect, and update terms of service on? I think that's one of the big questions around the whole battle helper topic. And how does that impact your team and your group perhaps coming up in the near future?
Yeah, for banning bots and battle helpers, that does kind of fall under our blanket of things that we work on, since it's less directly game related and more kind of working with or communicating with the game. Right now, that's basically waiting on legal and C-suite sign off on updating the terms of service. I know we do want to try to move forward with that, since it was something that the DAO did vote in. As far as enforceability, I think the bots is going to be a lot more viable from a technical perspective for us to enforce. Because, I mean, you've seen the modern battle numbers. Those have dropped quite significantly since we rolled out a ban on bots. And whether that's voluntary participation or the fact that we actually do have various things in place to try to enforce play through non-automated means, that seems to be fairly effective. Battle helpers is going to be tough. There are things we can do, and I don't really want to get into details, but it's still going to be difficult. Definitely the first step is just going to be putting in the terms of service, and then it's going to be up to services whether they want to violate those. Just making, if they make battle helpers unavailable publicly, that should cut down on a vast number of people who are using battle helpers to play the game. Trying to catch people using battle helpers is definitely a lot trickier than catching people using bots, though.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's. Oh, go ahead, Tails.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we had Siler on over at Team XBot within the last couple of months, and this was prior to the no bot modern, and yeah, shout out to the community here on this one. I think, man, it's a night and day experience playing in modern these days versus a couple of months ago. The fun factor is back, and it's so much fun to, if I come across Tails in ranked, most of the time one of us is gonna take the opportunity to fling some poo after the battle and talk a little smack, and just having that additional social element involved in the game again is so much fun. But it's interesting what you mentioned there, Gator, with respect to battle helper and the service providers for said battle helper, a la XBot. Siler has come out and been very vocal in saying that he would play nicely with the terms of service, and we saw him kind of preemptively shut down battle helper. Gosh, I want to say better part of a month ago at this point. And you definitely noticed a big difference in ranks. At least I did. And then I want to say it was about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Siler came back on and said he's going to reopen Battle Helper for the time being until terms of service is updated. And again, I certainly feel like the start of this present season that we're in, I can feel that pain. I feel like I'm coming up against some pretty stacked lineups or well thought out lineups, and naturally my first instinct tells me, oh, that's a battle helper right there. From a player perspective, do you still play, Gator? Are you involved in rank? Do you have time to play at all?
Yeah, that's what I usually do during long meetings. Yeah, I'm one of the few people, not few, but one of the handful of staff that I think still play manually. I know some people have just put their accounts on different bot platforms because they don't have time. Yeah, so if you actually play Investigator in Silver, that is actually me manually playing and usually screwing up and throwing wrong teams by misclicking. And I've got a separate main account, which is one that I've been playing before I made the Investigator one. That is in gold, occasionally diamond. So I have a decent, gameplay experience. Try to keep the pulse of what's going on. And yeah, I've been getting wrecked in modern.
It's tough, man. Yeah, that was my follow-up question, was if you felt like you had experienced some of that. So it's all good and well to adjust the terms of service and hope that somebody like Siler, these service providers are going to stick to their word and play nice with the terms of service. But it's and that Dave McCoy, I think, shout out to him when he put through these DAO proposals. That was kind of his hope for these service providers. I know he negotiated in the background with Siler to kind of find some fair middle ground to bringing the end to Battle Helper. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the team approaches the end of Battle Helper in response to that DAO proposal coming through. Who's to stop somebody like with the knowledge of code the way that Siler has, coming in and providing something else that's not going to play nicely with terms of service. Has there been any consideration? I don't think that the team is necessarily looking to expand at the moment, but we talked about it a few episodes ago, and the movie Catch Me If You Can came to my mind. Frank Abagnale was a career criminal committing fraud in XYZ places, and he was a pro at it, and he eventually got hired by the FBI to sniff out folks that were doing exactly what he had been committing throughout his career. Has there been any consideration, or is it even worth considering bringing somebody like a Siler on board to help solve the Battle Helper issue and attack it?
From my opinion, I should go back and say, because I said this off camera, but I'm on camera, all of my opinions only reflect my personal opinion and do not reflect the company or Steemmonsters or Splinterlands as a company's opinions. But if we had the budget to hire more people, I don't know that our first hire should be a anti-bot, anti-battle helper staff position. I definitely think Nate needs some more help from the UI UX art side. And I mean, if we're going to hire more developers, probably like to, we've got such a backlog of stuff, like to move some of these projects along. That being said, I don't know that it's necessarily a unique skill set. I know at least one other developer that does work here currently basically was making a battle helper and stopped after he got hired. There was a period of time where, I don't know if you know, Jens Osman was hired by the company to be a bot consultant. And I'm not sure how much benefit that really had for the Steemmonster side of things or Splinterlands side of things. That being said, I know some of those services have kind of volunteered that if we want assistance trying to detect people that are botting and using services, that they would be willing to help us. But so far, at this point, we're still waiting on it to come down that we can move forward with trying to take steps to actually ban battle helpers in those environments. And I should be clear, just modern tournaments and brawls, since that is the only thing that passed. Everything is still going to be legal and wild. And I mean, this is also not a novel problem. So going back historically, there's been like the Bubkey bots that used to kind of dominate the tournament scene for a long time, or at least place fairly high up there. So, I mean, if we drive kind of botting and battle helpers back to being a private service, hopefully that will still be an improvement, and that in most of play you will feel like you're playing against another real human player who's playing at a keyboard and using his brain, and not just getting optimized teams thrown against you, at least in modern ranked. From the company side, we'll see what we can do to detect stuff once it's approved to go through for the terms of service update.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the best that we could hope for, given the complex nature of the beast there, right? So we'll have to see. I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting times. I think one of the things that's interesting with our DAO, right, is what we're doing here in Splinterlands, and I say we as the company and the community and the player base, is a lot of what's happening here is you're forging new ground, right? New stuff that no other company, no other game has done before. And there's a good chance that we make some great calls from a DAO perspective, and maybe some not so great calls. So I think Matt's mentioned it on a couple of occasions, as well as when there's a mistake that's made, we can always look to address it and adapt and change once we see the data and see the effects. And I think that's not specific to battle helpers, but across the game. I mean, I think that's the kind of standpoint we have to take, right? Because this is kind of all new when it comes to Web3 economies and markets. Because if you look at the other markets for games out there, there's probably none as robust, as mature, and as functional as Splinterlands from a asset and NFT and just general perspective. So, we're gonna, probably have to correct things as we go. Out of curiosity, Gator, I had another technical question that I don't know if you can answer or not, but I figured I'd ask you since we have you here. And if you don't know the answer, it's fine. I'm just curious. When I hear Matt talk from time to time, he's mentioned in the past in interviews and in conversations that the Splinterlands has the potential to be forked, basically, and spun off in different versions, perhaps from a community standpoint, or something similar to that effect that he's mentioned. Out of curiosity, from a pure technical perspective, when Matt talks about a fork or a spin-off of Splinterlands, what does that technically consist of, and how feasible is that? Because I've heard it mentioned, but I don't understand how it could even happen, because Steemmonsters owns the code. Obviously, you're not going to open source that and give away the goose, right? So when Matt says that, do you know what that means technically and how that would translate?
I think what he means is someone could build a blockchain game that behaves similarly to Splinterlands in that it reads basically the Hive block history and tries to piece together a collection similar to what the Splinterlands collection would be, and tries to reproduce the gameplay of Splinterlands. But yeah, as a straight fork, I mean, even if we put the software out there publicly, there is a lot of infrastructure behind running Splinterlands. Just as someone who works on the infrastructure for it, this is not something that someone could readily just like spin up out of pocket. I do think he's making it sound a little bit easier than it would actually be. Having dug through kind of what we post on the blockchain, I do think it would be really difficult to fully reproduce what people own in Splinterlands. We've done a better job with the GLG launch of putting kind of all the details on chain. But I do think he may be overselling the ability for someone to easily clone Splinterlands.
Yeah, great question there, Tails. I'm I was always thinking fork as in along the same lines as something like a Splinter Forge, for example, where you're still leveraging the current assets and kind of allowing an additional platform for those assets to interact and potentially earn. So along those same lines, have you having some knowledge of the inner workings of Splinterlands and a background in game development and all that sort of stuff, is that something that you've been considering is potentially longer term taking another stab at putting the game on the Hive blockchain?
I've thought about it, and I have some hopes that maybe when we get into Arcade Colony that we'll get some time to make little games from the put some of the developers on spinning up some initial projects on that for people to be able to go and see as kind of demos. But as far as doing something outside of what I'm doing for Splinterlands right now, I don't have time. If I ever, well, I assume at some point I will move on from this job, either through retirement or life. I'm not sure if I will make a Hive blockchain based Splinterland style game or something Web3 necessarily. I do have a backlog of single player games that would like to at some point get out before I die, but we'll see if that ever happens.
So out of curiosity as well, Gator, we talk about Hive and the Hive ecosystem and how, I think from a functional perspective, Hive is great for Splinterlands and how the game works. Have you run across any challenges with Invenium or with GLG with scalability on the blockchain at this point? Or is everything, with the contracts and everything, working as expected with some of the new ventures and the new vision?
As far as blockchain goes with Hive, it is pretty great for what we're doing with its really fast block times and pretty established interfaces. I think most of the challenges that we've run into haven't been on the blockchain side. They've usually been more on either a database side or things unrelated to getting things on Web3. And I guess I should say I'm not as familiar with all of what's going on with GLG and Invenium. I do occasionally get pulled in or go peek in on what they're doing, but from my understanding, none of their major issues have been issues with getting things onto Hive.
Gotcha. And out of curiosity, the data that Splinterlands probably has to maintain and control from a volume and size perspective has got to be growing pretty large. There's millions of cards out there historically, and still many millions more to be opened. And each one of those has metadata associated with it. And we're adding more metadata with land, attributes and stuff that we have to track and stuff like that. And then we have card history and purchasing and transfers and stuff that's happening now, I think at the card level or NFT level. What does that mean for Splinterlands moving forward? I think, the Amazon costs and stuff from a server cost perspective came up, I think it was last year, talking about how do we reduce that and get to a better spot. With some of these architectural changes on the technology side, is that a concern at all with the databases and the data sorting and timing?
Yeah, Splinterlands has a huge amount of data. There's something like 52 million cards, not counting the combined cards, which we keep in the history, and billions upon of battles that we keep records for. So we have a really great database team. Butcherblock is the kind of head of database. So when the game blew up in 2021, they were just really throwing stuff, together as quickly as they could to try to keep the game functional. Um, you guys probably remember back in the days where the game would crash regularly. The rental markets would be hours behind. So over the past year, or when they did a lot of things to kind of keep the game running, they usually did it by quick but expensive means of doing it. They blew up the number of servers, the amount of data we were writing, threw in all kinds of expensive third-party caching systems. So over the past year, we've been taking a more thoughtful look at what we're doing with our system and really improving how things are handled. I won't get too much into SQL technical side, but we've made a lot of improvements to data integrity, to reduce the amount of data that we need to write. We've actually been going through and looking at some of the historical data. We dropped, I think, 5 terabytes of historical battle queue data that we just never used. We just had a giant table of it. And that's separate from the actual battle history, which has pretty much all of the queue information copied into it. So yeah, over the past year, we've dramatically reduced a lot of our Amazon costs, which were mostly database based costs. And even over the past month, we've continued to make improvements to that. The good thing about land is there's only 150,000 plots. So everything's kind of constrained by that number, which in the scheme of things isn't that large. When we're talking about millions of cards and billions of battle records. That being said, one of the main things we're kind of working on right now, or getting pulled into working with the land team on, is making sure land is performant. There have been some issues with that in our testing. So we are looking at making sure that the additional tables and queries that we're adding make sense and are quick, and that we're not reinventing the wheel trying to pull your collection to assign to land plots. Hopefully that answers that question. If not, I could try to go into any more details that you might have questions on.
No, it does. Thank you.
I'd love to kind of shift gears with you a little bit, Gator, and touch on something you mentioned a little bit in passing earlier. We touched on it a little bit, but it was really interesting. Prior to last week's town hall, everybody was kind of speculating that Rebellion 2024, like no brainer. There's no way we're getting Rebellion before 2024, and more than likely, maybe as late as Q2. Well, that's obviously not going to happen. Aggie came out and he wasn't very subtle in dropping hints that Rebellion is coming later this year, and it's going to be on store shelves as early as December 2023. And shout out to Infidel. He did a little bit of a video, kind of analyzing that and looking at the initial quote unquote announcement from Aggie on town hall, and he had an interesting call out, and I went back and watched it for myself, and he was absolutely right. He was looking at the body language of the other folks that were on that call, and there was zero flinching. It was just like matter of fact, and nobody was surprised. So is that? I'm not asking you to either confirm or deny that Rebellion is coming 2023, but is that was it no surprise? I mean, has that always kind of been the game plan? It's just been played a little bit more closely to the chest with all things land going on?
I think the original plan was to actually have a mini set come out. There was for a long time some negotiations going on with external company to do kind of a promotional set with branded characters. Um, but as time has worn on, and I don't think a good deal ever got reached between the two parties. I don't know. I wasn't really part of any negotiations Aggie was doing. Uh, I think with how late it's gotten in the year, that's basically been put on the shelf, and we're just going to move on to Rebellion. Um, there have actually been a couple devs pulled to work on Rebellion for the last probably month or two. So there's a lot of work that's already done. Um, I think it's a high degree of confidence that we're going to be able to get a Rebellion set out before the end of the year from the development side. Um, and it is from my personal opinion, probably a good idea because with the release of Rebellion, that'll be a shift from modern. So Untamed will rotate out, which is definitely a cost impediment for any new players that want to play modern seriously. Trying to pick up the Untamed cards is not cheap. Um, so I think just from you know, since we've made modern the non-bot format, rotating Untamed out and rotating a new set in is a lot more impactful. So people that want to focus on modern will probably want to pick up Rebellion cards. So from a company standpoint, hopefully this will lead to card pack sales, which we haven't really had in a while.
Yeah, I agreed with all of those things. I think I'm certainly one of those players that I came in post Untamed, and obviously you take a quick look at the market, and it's incredibly cost prohibitive to be competing in modern with at any sort of high league with Untamed cards. Well, it was my understanding we had Nate on a couple of months back, and he kind of alluded to the idea that Rebellion as a set was actually kind of signed and sealed already. And it was just kind of waiting in the wings. So kind of looking forward, you mentioned possibly the most imperative need in the company being on the UX UI side. I'm assuming that has nothing to do with Rebellion and more to do with kind of gameplay and overall user experience and that sort of stuff. Are you able to kind of address that comment in tandem with the idea that you mentioned earlier that with Rebellion is going to be entering into the mix some new game mechanics and that sort of stuff, and we've heard Aggie kind of mentioning post land is going to be a focus on gameplay. Are all of those things kind of wrapped into Rebellion? Is Rebellion more of a full? It's not just a card set. It's like a new era of Splinterlands. Is kind of how I'm understanding. Your comments with Aggie's comments with Nate's comments, and I'd love to kind of hear your interpretation of what does Rebellion mean for Splinterlands.
Okay, well, this gets into stuff where I probably can't or shouldn't talk about some of the things because I know a lot of the features for Rebellion that are currently planned.
Gator, nobody listens to this show, dude. It's just you, me, Tails talking.
Yeah. As far as the art goes, I mean, we've known Rebellion's been coming for since Splinterfest. They had some art done back then. So I think, Nate has card art that's been done for quite some time. His UI UX needs are more along the lines of with us redesigning things. So kind of Battles 2.0, redesigning all the screens. I know we want to, heck, mobile first, making the screens work with mobile is definitely going to require some UI UX thought. And even other projects. So, going back to Soulkeep and Invenium, there's definitely going to be some UI UX needs there. I know Soulkeep was kind of an external project, so a lot of that got done by the Double Coconut team, but I know Nate wanted to heavily revamp the Splinterlands side of that, try to have his team take a look at the UI UX experience of it. As far as Rebellion goes, there should be some new features that may require some UI UX changes. But I can't really get into details of that because it's for other people to announce on town halls once we get closer to it.
So out of curiosity, Gator, I know this is, I guess, put on your Splinterlands player or gamer hat for this question. It's not really maybe a technical question, but with the change from modern to wild, a lot of Untamed cards going to wild and making that change, like you said, it's going to be, a little bit probably better for the newer player to come in and battle in modern. But one of the things I don't think probably Matt could have predicted with the schedule of Rebellion and Aggie and Nate as well is in the last, basically 2 months, we went from a bots, everywhere in Splinterlands to bots only in wild. And as such, there's been impacts on the reward pools, for example, between modern and wild. And, I think we're seeing better and higher rewards for humans in modern, which is great. But now if Untamed cards are shifted now into wild, and not just Untamed, but any cards in the future, like Chaos Legion, a year from now being shifted into wild. Has there been any, I guess, thoughts from Matt's side or the team side, or even from your side as a player, on how to maintain asset or card values for wild sets outside of land? Because I don't think people want to put Jotun out to the farm or the pasture necessarily, right, on land. And if we have a continual push of assets out of modern into wild, what prevents the wild league from becoming the land of misfit toys, where basically you're battling with bots for like scraps, basically? Because if you look at the battles, for example, if you go into Peak Monsters dashboard and you see the number of battles in wild versus modern, it's not even close, right? It's a huge gap in the number of battles, and the rewards will reflect that over time in the pools. Just curious what your take is on that from a player perspective. I mean, obviously you don't have to share anything from a design perspective, but just curious what your thoughts would be.
Yeah, I think that's something that any long-running collectible card game struggles with. Having come from a Magic background, they tried to address it by splitting out into multiple formats. So they had kind of their modern, and then they had like an in-between limited extended, I think was format, where more sets were legal, but not all sets. And then there was basically the all set legal format, which usually very few people would play. Back in the Magic one, usually would do a lot of proxying of cards if you played that format. I do think from a Splinterland side, we will probably need to try to add more ways of using your cards than necessarily just battles. I know right now, we've got land. There definitely was some talk about kind of staking your cards into Soulkeep at some point to give them utility to get bonuses in that game. And I think that there may try to be some other, as more games and projects get added, probably try to see if we can add some utility for cards by basically staking them into those different projects. And I mean, that is also going to be kind of a question for the DAO to figure out as time goes on, because right now we've got, I think, 3 years left of rewards for SPS, and after that, we are going to need to figure out how we're going to reward players across both formats, not just figure out how we're going to deal with the large number of accounts in Wild.
Yeah, and that's a good question as well, or a good point, Gator, is, with this kind of like 3-year window, right, or runway, there's been a lot of talk, in the town halls and the town squares about the company's runway from a financial perspective, but there's not necessarily a lot of conversation yet about the SPS token distribution and the SPS rewards, right? Because right now the DAO has funds, and that's great that we have DEC and SPS there. But as you mentioned, at some point, the million or so SPS that gets minted daily stops, right? Or it gets reduced, pretty quickly over the next 2 to 3 years. At what point does that become kind of an albatross for the team, the development team's perspective, where it becomes like, hey, we can't take the luxury of time to, take years to develop and deliver functionality here. We need to get stuff out faster because we have, basically a ticking time bomb, which is the SPS airdrop ending, right? At some point where we have to be self-sufficient. Does that come up at all in discussions with your team at all? Is like, how do we prepare for this 3-year window?
It hasn't been a part of any discussions that I've been a part of, though that may be a higher level discussion between Matt, Nagy, and kind of the C-suite board. But with basically the game having handed off responsibility for SPS to the DAO, that is going to be something that, as a community, we need to probably start thinking about. Because a lot of Matt's kind of idea with the DAO was to hand off a lot of the ownership and responsibility of Splinterlands to a decentralized group, since he is very big on decentralizing things. Right now, I think the company's focus is trying to make up on its past promises and get things where it can start focusing more on developing new products and additional things in the kind of Invenium arcade colony space. But yeah, it is something that, as a company, if the DAO doesn't make any significant decisions in the next couple of years, then I expect Matt will probably start to drive some proposals to make sure that rewards go into the future.
Personally speaking, I would love to see, I realize the creation of the DAO and empowering the community and the stakeholders via their SPS stake. It's a very powerful sentiment. It's a very cool premise. I'm wondering, you personally, and again, feel free to toss out your asterisks as necessary. Are you a big believer, based on what you've seen from the DAO? We've had DAO proposals, community proposals for the better part of the last, 10 months now. I want to say we had our first one late last year. Based on the types of proposals that have come through, the discourse around said proposals, are you on board with Matt where, the future of Splinterlands and the tokens, the SPS, should be in the hands of the community? Or do you feel like, would we be better off reserving, kind of a majority vote from the company to kind of sway things? Where do you kind of fall personally as, part of the SPS DAO? Where do you fall in terms of your opinion and perspective on all that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Personally, I have usually agreed with what has been voted in, but there are definitely some votes that I did not agree with the outcomes of. Most of them are around the Rift Watchers release, where there were some issues when people thought they were buying promo qualifying packs and fell just outside that window, myself included. And then we put it to a DAO vote, how we wanted to handle it. And that was a pretty contentious, people voted in a way that I don't think the company would have handled it, because the company tends to be very, I want to say, customer friendly. Like, we usually try to, if something goes wrong, we try to make it right. And with some of those votes, the DAO just voted that people were more or less out of luck, or at least they could just return their packs, and the DAO would refund them. I do think most of the big holders tend to be fairly reasonable with their voting. Um, and usually, when something's important, Matt or Aggie will make a pitch for it, which usually helps helps it go through. Um, it is tough, especially in a bear market where there's a lot of salt coming from the community. uh, there have been a bunch of proposals to try to get the DAO to be more self-sufficient, which have been voted down. And I understand why people voted them down, because usually that would have negatively impacted, their personal profits by kind of shifting those into the DAO, and things like, APRs from liquidity pools and such. But I've got a lot of hope riding on Dave McCoy mainly, because he's such a good, leader of the community, and usually gets people to kind of, like, vote in the best interest of the game rather than themselves. So I'm hoping that as long as people like him are around, we'll get the DAO to make smart decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you mentioned, Gator, I think the DAO is very powerful, and it's, it can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the fervor in the community. I think I think what Splinterlands is doing here is, like I said, it's very innovative. Like, I don't think there are really many true Web3 ecosystems that have really a functional DAO at this point that's really making, critical decisions for the economy. Like you mentioned, Gator, I mean, Splinterlands, the company, has given up, to some degree, control and direction of certain critical aspects of the game here to the community, to the stakeholders of SPS. And, from a pure capital corporate perspective, that's scary, right? And we're not always going to get it right as a community, because, like you said, there's people that have a lot of SPS stake that might be voting not with the best interests of the game or the sustainability of the game at heart, but maybe with what makes their their wallets heavier when it comes to crypto tokens or crypto values. So it's going to be interesting here for us to kind of walk that fine line, I think. But again, as you mentioned, I mean, the DAO is, a very interesting part of our future. And, how we use it, how we wield it is going to be important. So people like Matt, people like Dave McCoy, other people, are going to have voices that hopefully steer us, all of us, lemmings, in the right direction, herd the cattle, so to speak, because, we want, obviously, this to be very successful. So out of curiosity, Gator, do you have all the SPS that you want? Is your SPS bag packed, or are you looking to accumulate more?
I could probably use more, especially since we added it as a reward modifier. I haven't. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've sold any other than to spend it on. So I bought, a node license when we did that, um, and I bought some Rift Watchers packs. But by and large, I have staked what I've gotten from playing the game, or from airdrop rewards back when that was a big thing. Um, I'm still a little short of where I probably would like to be for getting ranked awards in gold. definitely far from where I'd like to be if I can climb back into Diamond. And as some people will say, it's hard to ever have enough.
Yeah, it was a trick question there, Tails. Our bags are never packed, bro. Keep stacking those stats, bro.
But we do.
Gator. Yeah, hallelujah. Gator, I'd love to kind of pick your brain with respect to again the player gamer hat perspective. If you were, well, I guess it's a little bit of a mix, but hypothetically, as a player, as a gamer, if you were at the helm of guiding ship Splinterlands through the remainder of the quarter, with respect to development updates, what would you like to see post 1.5? Like where do you kind of personally envision the greatest priority for the players, for the folks that are keeping the game alive?
Personally, I think I'd like to see some new gameplay modes added, just to kind of get the game to be, feel a little more fresh and alive. Because some of us have been playing ranked for a couple of years now with pretty similar gameplay. So hopefully Rebellion will add some new mechanics that will freshen things up. But outside of that, I would like to see some of the things that Weirdbeard has kind of championed in the past, of some sort of arena mode or draft mode, or different things that other collectible card games have kind of had in the past, brought in. I also would like to, I know I've touched on it a few times, like to see Soulkeep get out the door. As a player of games, I do usually find tower defense enjoyable. As a player, I found it a little odd that I got to play the original public beta, that it's basically not a real-time tower defense game. It's kind of a plan and then it plays out, similar to how the Splinterlands, you pick your team and then it plays out automatically. But I would like to see more interesting experiences added to the game. And as a player in general, for like longevity of the game, I would like to see some improvements to the new player experience. I did play some bronze this past season, which was not an enjoyable experience. um, I could see new players getting frustrated pretty easily, and I do think we need to really put some significant time into figuring out how to make it fun for people coming in, as a new player, and not having to deal with getting run over by Yoden and
Yeah, I was gonna say
mass. Yeah.
Bronze 1 is it's brutal out there. It's all Yoden and Quora and Llama and Kron. It all the bots, for all the dismay that new players had with dealing with bot lineups. They had to deal with Unicorn Mustang. They didn't have to deal with Lamacron. It's Bronze is in Modern is no joke these days.
Yeah, even Silver. I mean, I was playing yesterday, and like my opponent had like a Lux and max level legendaries of Rooney, and like it's like, this is Silver 3. What are you doing?
So on that note, Gator, I mean, why do you think a Lux is playing in Silver 3 rather than Gold or Diamond? Because it's a max level summoner, right? Is it because rewards are such that it makes sense for them to play there? Or I'm just curious, because I've seen similar lineups where there's just cards I'm like, man, why is this down here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing it's either someone that is, I don't know, to say new, but hadn't played and fell down, or is coming back and just rented cards to kind of run through, or owns the cards and they're just still in Silver and haven't crowned out yet, since it was pretty early in the season. But outside of that, there are a couple players like Kira 1995, who's just a silver player, but has pretty much every card. He's been a silver leaderboard player for the past, however many years I've been playing. So yeah, there's occasionally just those players that stay in the league. But yeah, I do not expect to run into Lux much in silver.
Yeah, I think some of what you addressed will be kind of solved with at least what it sounds like by the rebellion stuff. But generally, experience wise, I hopped into I saw Aftersound and Darkest Night were fiddling around a little bit with Parallel, the new trading card game, and I hopped on and checked it out. Much to my chagrin, it's Windows only, so I could only go so far. But the initial experience is just beautiful, man. Like the website and like navigating through and trying to figure stuff out it's really it doesn't feel like Web3 at all. It's AAA level stuff. And I think that moving forward, I think Champions, there's a game that Tails, maybe you can fill me in here. Bulldog has been hyping up quite a bit. Champion something from Gala. Champions Arena. Yes, from Gala. And it's also got a very beautiful kind of interface and user experience. Splinterlands, on the other hand, as much as I love the game, there's a lot to be desired there. Is there, man, I just kind of thinking about the roadmap and what's to come after 1.5. How are you guys going to squeeze it all in? Like there's a lot of boxes to be ticked in the next, if we're gearing up for the next bull run and if that's coming on the heels of the next Bitcoin halving, and it is the better part of a year away, but holy moly, there's a lot of boxes to be ticked between now and then. And yeah, I do not envy you guys as team members in terms of prioritization and executing on all this stuff.
Yeah, it is an older game, which I guess does have some benefits in that it's got an existing audience and the dedicated user base that is stuck around for these years. A lot of those games aren't coming from a Web3 first. They're basically, they made a game and then they're sticking in some Web3 aspects, like they're throwing NFTs in, which isn't necessarily a bad way to go. You get some pretty games when you start with developing out of basically a game first. And that's kind of the benefit of coming from a game first perspective, where you make the game and make it nice and pretty, and then come in and add Web3 after, as opposed to making a Web3 based game kind of off the bat. Hopefully over the next couple of years, we will improve the look and feel, especially once we get to actually replacing the battle system, because that is going to be a big lift. We have had a couple discussions about different ways of making it look nicer. And hopefully as we go forward and try to make some other games in this space with Arcade Colony and Invenium, that will have those come from a kind of game design first and maybe Web3 added in, so we get some nicer looking games put out as well. I know it wasn't our game, but we helped out the Chippy Dino folks, and their game actually looks pretty decent. I don't know if you've seen any of the gameplay for it, but that was a Unity, I believe, game that they kind of added Web3 into after the fact.
Yeah, I had seen some of the kind of game first, Web3 later approach applied in the Champions Arena pitch from Bulldog. And I'm curious, maybe I just don't have enough of an understanding, and this question is posed to you as well, Tels. With Weirdbeard, I want to say the better part of 6 to 8 months ago now, but it was a guest on a couple of different content creator shows, and and kind of champion the idea of his free to play version of Splinterlands. Is that kind of the idea? Is an area where it's purely focused on gameplay and fun, and then you get to experience all of that stuff with unowned, freely available assets, and hopefully there's enough there to kind of hook, line, sinker folks into the more traditional approach on Splinterlands. Do you have I guess two-part question. Is the free-to-play stuff still in the discussion for on Weirdbeard's docket? And B, am I understanding that correctly?
We'll start with B. Yeah, that was an idea that he did champion for a while, 6 to 8 months ago, especially as a mobile option, since one of the big issues with mobile is payments on there. So the idea that if we put just a free-to-play version of the game for people to go on and get interested in the game, and then hopefully come into the quote-unquote real game where you have to own the cards to play. Don't know if that's still on the docket anywhere. That may have been before he realized how much stuff he's got outstanding between boss monsters and all the phases of land. Also, I think there may have been some pushback from Matt and Aggie that they felt that that might kind of devalue the experience of owning the cards. I know we had to kind of fight for the open tournaments or the ghost card tournaments where you can have all the cards, because they didn't really want us to add a lot of gameplay that devalues ownership. There was also a version of the idea that for a while where Weirdbeard was talking about having them set up as arcade machines where you got a free-to-play experience and try to put them in arcades around the world. But similarly, I think that may have gotten kind of put on the back burner, if not defunct completely. Though the free-to-play as an option may still get some traction from him at some point. But I don't see that coming out in the near future.
One question I had, Gator, is, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, so if you can't, just please pass. But we've seen Weirdbeard pick up a lot of responsibility this year, and thankfully he has, because he's picked up the ball and he's been a true champion and gone to work for the community here and tried to balance things, I'm sure, as best as possible and get things done. But that being said, I mean, prior to, let's say, I don't know when it was exactly, let's say Q2 of this year, right? Q1, I don't know exactly when it was, but who was doing this role before Weirdbeard as the product owner of this kind of, I don't know exactly what the title is, to be honest with you, but to kind of take the vision and ownership of the schedule and the releases and the roadmap. I don't think we saw that previously before now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they've been very opaque about both the staffing and job responsibilities. But let me walk backwards and see if I get this right. So prior to Weirdbeard taking it over, Matt said he was going to be in charge of the enhancements team, the product owner for enhancements. But he did not really enjoy all that's involved in that, because there's a lot of basically paperwork and updating tickets and getting work assigned. So he decided he wanted more of a product design role, and that's kind of how Weirdbeard ended up slotting into the role, where Matt moved out to do more just design work overall. And before Matt, it I think was Homestead and Wrath. I think it may have been Wrath. They both got let go when they did the layoffs and the company restructuring. At which point Matt was going to take over doing the kind of product ownership for Splinterlands. So that's kind of how that has gone.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I guess I was just trying to put some of the pieces together, and I probably should have known that. But it just seems that Weirdbeard is definitely more. I don't know if it's vocal, but he's on every town square, he's on every town hall. He's not providing dates, but he's providing feedback, right, and inputs. So, and I'm not sure we maybe had that consistently before. So maybe that's just why it's maybe a new experience, or maybe a new method of operation. I'm not really sure. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, it is funny looking back. When I started playing, we would get updates maybe once a quarter, and they would be like, here's here's a new ability. And it would be a huge deal. And nowadays we're doing the weekly updates with multiple changes usually. But yeah, Weirdbeard also, as you guys probably remember, but for anybody listening, was really brought in to be the tournament organizer and to kind of take over for Aggie for doing the monthly tournaments and try to kind of promote the game as an esport. And his role has kind of really taken a left turn since those days. He also has a background in radio, so I do think he's a lot better at the kind of public speaking and announcing. But it is good to have him, talking about the game. He does, I feel like, get a little overexcited, and maybe talk about stuff that's as if it were coming out soon, that may not be coming out for quite some time. But it is good that we have some information going out to the community.
That's the radio personality coming out that you're hearing there. You got to hype things up. Yeah, I think I still feel like despite the left turn and any subsequent turns that have happened in Weirdbeard's career path throughout his tenure with Splinterlands, he's still holding down the fort on the tournament stuff. I do subscribe to the tournament Discord notifications, and I do get those weekly pings from Weirdbeard saying new tournaments are up. I still see him really active in Discord, soliciting feedback from folks and putting together surveys around stuff. And man, that guy is he doesn't know when to push pause. He's full steam ahead all the time. And I do appreciate what he's doing for the community and for the game. And I would love to see, the battle pass is something that he's long put forward as something that he would like to see enter into the mix. Has there been any talk? We talked about getting rebellion packs on shelves as obviously a stream of revenue that has been we missed with Zerial. So outside of Zerial, there was the last stream of consistent revenue, and I think consistent is a stretch. Is Chaos Legion? That was a while back. Has there been any talk of introducing new streams of revenue, i.e., through something like land, in any way, shape, or form? Or I think Battle Pass is obviously it's going to be, the volume of revenue is going to be dwarfed by something like a big pack sale or a new set being introduced. But I think there's certainly something to be said for consistent stream of revenue through something like a battle pass, through something like something that can be purchased for land. Is that something that's going around the campfire at Team Splinterlands in terms of introducing some new streams for keeping the lights on?
There's been, we've talked about the battle pass. I know that is, like many things, behind where we'd like it to be. I think we originally wanted it, I forget if that was on the Q4 or Q3 timeline we put out. But there's a few other things that we've talked about. Skins is, I feel like, a fairly easy revenue opportunity that we've kind of let go. We haven't put out the skins for Chaos Legion or Rift Watchers yet. I'm hoping we put some time towards getting out where there's a market for skins and we start actually selling them again. Also, a lot of the whole idea behind Arcade Colony and Invenium is bringing in revenue sources other than our user base. So kind of like business to business sort of model where we're basically providing Web3 services for games that want to move on to the blockchain. Or Chibi Dinos was kind of we'll say, test case of can we get somebody else's product up on our infrastructure. So there's definitely been a lot of discussions around ideas with having a bigger footprint, I think, in the Web3 space. As far as selling stuff to our users, other than Battle Pass and skins, I don't think there's been a lot of new stuff pushed forward. I know we've had the voucher store on the back burner for a couple of years now, it feels like. Probably only a year, but trying to add more utility there, which is not necessarily going to drive company revenue, but just to try to drive value into holder assets. So hopefully we'll get to some of those. I don't know if it's going to be in the last couple months of this year, but fingers crossed 2024 we start getting some of this stuff out the door.
I know you just mentioned everybody's favorite token, the poor redheaded stepchild of the Splinterlands world in vouchers. I'm just curious, and Hardpoint mentioned, he's kind of the unspoken god of vouchers, always with the grand vision for where vouchers can go and what kind of utility they can grant the spender, the user. Is the voucher store a distant dream? Is it a unicorn that we're chasing? Is that something that's I'll let you fill in the blanks, Gator.
Yeah, so that was a project that was tentatively on my team's plate back when it was the sustaining team. When we first spun up teams, and then it got pushed back because of so many other things to do. And it's kind of been the redheaded stepchild is fairly apropos. There has been some discussion recently about different ways of adding more utility for vouchers. We definitely have gone. So the original idea for vouchers is, in my opinion, a pretty good idea. It rewards you for staking SPS without you needing to unstake your SPS and spend it. It's supposed to be the the tokens that you use as reward tokens for holding staked SPS. And since we've gone out of Chaos Legion bonus packs for it, we really haven't filled in that gap of what to do with them. There's a couple minor things that I'm pretty sure we're going to add before the end of the year. They won't be, earth-shattering uses, but I think we'll add some ways where people can burn them to get some game utility.
Yeah, I think anything is better than what we've got at the moment, right? And it's interesting that the way that you pitch vouchers is exactly how I think most of us kind of perceive vouchers. It should be a reward for staking your SPS. You can then purchase according to your stake in the game. Has there been any consideration for subsequent sets or subsets, i.e. dice or Rift Watchers, instead of being available for SPS like Rift Watchers was, allowing vouchers to be the main purchasable currency there?
There hasn't been any direct discussion around that. I don't know what the future plans for mini sets are after the Rift Watchers one. I know that was kind of a special where we put it out on behalf of the DAO to raise funds, for it to get off the ground. I mean, if there's going to be a DAO proposal for us to do a set that's paid entirely in vouchers, that could be a thing. But I don't know if that's going to be something the company puts forth as a proposal.
Yeah, I mean, for my purposes, I'd just rather see the focus be on the DEC and SPS tokens. I would love to see personally vouchers used for soulbound cosmetic items, things like skins, things like, cosmetic things I can do to my land plots. These are things that don't have value in a token perspective to bots or anyone else, but it has value to humans and real players of the game. And being soulbound and being for flexing or bragging rights in the game seems adequate to burn vouchers today or yesterday or tomorrow. So hopefully we can get some more, designers working with Nate's team. We can get some of these things in place because, I know Aftersound's talked about on his stream a lot. I mean, vouchers are, they're being minted quite prolifically here, and we're not getting a lot of use cases for them, unfortunately. So, hopefully we can get something in 2024, maybe 2023 that will appeal to the voucher holders that have staked SPS and they can use it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would love to see the, kind of the intangible stuff that can't go to market, i.e. skins or maybe a cool title or something to put on your land. Become available via voucher purchase. All right, Gator. We'll this is the last 2 hours have kind of flown by. Is there anything kind of burning a hole in your pocket you'd like to put out there for either Tails or myself or anybody listening?
As someone that works for Splinterlands, I'd like to thank you and everybody else that plays the game and is involved with the game and the community for being around, and for you guys for putting out content and being so involved in kind of the community and letting people know about the game. I do think these podcasts are also pretty interesting. I've started listening to some of the recent ones because I work with these people, and it's cool to go back and hear some of their stories that I may not have heard in just the day-to-day interactions with them.
Very cool, man. Well, appreciate the listenership. Go ahead, Tails.
I was going to say, definitely, thank you, Gator, for spending your holiday Labor Day here evening speaking with us and talking shop and Splinterlands here. And, just one last question, if I could ask you here, does the team, I know everyone's super busy, but does the team actually consume, creator content in the community? Do they listen to it? And do you listen to it at all outside of work to understand kind of what the feeling is on the streets of the Splinterverse out there?
It varies from team member to team member. For myself, I do tend to listen to a couple of the content creators, and I do read Discord pretty regularly. Also, just to try to keep a track if there's issues with the game, since usually the community will bring that up in Discord pretty quickly. Sometimes when it gets brought to support, sometimes there's some delay before it gets brought to me. So sometimes I can look into things much quicker that way. But also just to, I've been around for the last couple of years. I try not to post as much anymore because it's kind of an awkward feeling nowadays where, like, if I'm posting something, it's from the team. So with air quotes around it, from the team. So I try to be a little more quiet on Discord and not get pulled into conversations. But I do try to listen, and I, want community feedback. And I know that a couple other people do. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, like Tail said, man, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us. Happy Labor Day, and hope you had a safe and happy long weekend and are gearing up for the short week and the hard press to the end of wherever that checkered flag may lie, man. I'm not going to ask for dates. I'm not going to ask for time frames or speculation, but on behalf of the whole community and us here at the People's Guild, we appreciate what you do, and we got your back, Gator. You and the rest of the dev team over there.
Well, thanks for having me, and happy Labor Day to you and everybody listening.
All righty. Well,
appreciate it, Gator. And you've been listening to
the People's Guild.